Hello, so today I thought we'd look at tomatoes. Now, I love growing tomatoes. Tomatoes are without doubt one of my favourite fruits, but it's always a bit of a gamble growing them in our climate. On days like today, you think you're going to be a great tomato grower, but we all know we've had this horrible wet weather, and wet weather and tomatoes never do well because they always get this disease called blight, which starts off as this kind of black splodgy spots on the leaves and then quickly takes down the whole plant and all the fruit and turns it into mush. And you get blight on days where there is high humidity or dampness and high temperature. So I think once the temperature gets to around about 18 degrees plus and it's wet, classic blight day. And so it always gets more problematic as you go into July and August, which is kind of heartbreaking because that's when your plants are doing really well. So here are my lovely tomato plants. These are very healthy. They are desperately in need of potting on. You can tell that's happening because there's lots of white roots coming out the bottom. But they're good, sturdy plants. They're self-supporting. They will need staking. But essentially they're very healthy, they're a good colour, they're good leaf shape, and we have the start of flowers here. So these are all signs that they should definitely get into bigger pots. You can actually grow tomatoes in tiny pots, but you just have to feed and water them all day, every day. So by putting them in a bigger pot, you have to do essentially less work. And the minute you start to have flowers, that's a sign you should start feeding regularly, because what you really want to do is feed them with high nitrogen and high potash so that you really force them into fruiting as much as possible. It occurred to me, because I am a lazy, lackluster gardener sometimes, people might have tomatoes just like me, which look like this. And this is not a good tomato. You also might be able to find tomatoes like this in the discount section at garden centres. And if you love a project, this is one to take on. So, in the tomato world, there are two types of tomatoes. There's bush tomatoes, which grow into kind of small bush, and they have like bush-like shape, and they're ones that you put in containers and hanging baskets like Tumbling Tom, and they are called bush tomatoes or determinate tomatoes, and you don't side shoot. And all the other tomatoes, which are called cordon or indeterminate tomatoes, you have to side shoot. Now, you'll see that when you buy this on the label, it will tell you whether it's a bush tomato or not. So if it's a bush tomato, you can just walk away now and go and have a cup of tea and not watch the rest of the video. However, if you've bought a cordon or an indeterminate tomato, you have to listen very carefully, because in an indeterminate or cordon tomato, you have to side shoot. And actually I think this might be a little better to see on this one. And the side shoots are these shoots here. See this shoot down here? So what happens is you have the main stem growing up here, you have a leaf axis just there, and in it you have a side shoot, and you have to take the side shoots off, because if you don't take the side shoots off, this is what happens, right? This is the main stem, but it's really weak and fallen over, and these are the side shoots, and they won't support themselves either. So essentially what's happened is the whole plant falls over. So healthy plant, unhealthy plant. Now, with side shoots, what you have to do, if you do them in the afternoon, you'll find that the plant has less water in it and it's a lot bendier, and you'll have to use secateurs. But in the morning, while it's still got lots of vigour from the night of taking in water, you can just snap them off, and you push them forward and then you push them back, and you keep doing that, and eventually they come off. Now, the interesting thing about a side shoot is, if you take off those bottom leaves and you were to plant it in a pot, just like this, it would root, and it would fruit roughly 3 weeks after this one. So you can bulk up and have loads of tomatoes if you want to. So if you have a tomato that's doing really well and a tomato that's not doing well, and this one has side shoots, take off the side shoots, put them in a pot, make sure you keep them watered really well for the first couple of weeks, because they are essentially have to root, and then you'll find that you get second plants really quickly. That's an old nurseryman's trick. And the reason that can happen is because you see all these hairs on the stem down here, all of those can turn into roots if they're put in a dark environment with soil around them. And that's because the tomato in its wild habit, and this is doing a really good example of it, grows along the ground like a scrambly thing. It doesn't grow upright like this, it just scrambles over the ground. It comes from Mexico. And you can see here, I'll show you carefully, see those nodules appearing there and all the way there along the stem? That's because the plant has sat on its side and it's recognised that the stem is now horizontal and it's trying to produce roots there. So, on a good plant you side shoot regularly, and the best time to side shoot is when they're about, can you see these ones? See, main stem, leaf shoot, the one at 45 degrees, and see how easily they come out? And you can just do it like that. That's all the side shoots needs doing. We do it again on this one. Main stem, leaf axis, 45 degrees, that's a side shoot. 45 degrees, 45 degrees. And like I say, when they're bigger they are a bit harder to get off. You could root all of those if you wanted to. So the main stem is always a bit darker in colour and is more hairy than the side shoots if you're trying to work out what they are doing. And so what you would do is you would cut off that one, that one, that one, that one, and then, that's the thing, you take off these bottom leaves and you'd plant it right the way up to there. Because do you remember how I said that if there's anything on the stem, any hair on the stem whatsoever, and there's fine hairs all the way up, can turn into a root. So if you buried it up to here, you would essentially turn it into having a huge root mass, and it would quickly turn into a plant that looks like this again, which is unbelievable but true. However, I have enough tomatoes to not, I think, bother with this one. So, here's my happy healthy tomato, doing really well. Definitely needs repotting because you can see the roots are coming out the bottom. And this is the size of pot it needs to go into. And this is kind of the minimum pot I would grow a tomato in, because if you grow them in something like this, like I said, you can do it, they will fruit, but you just have to water every day, every day. So the bigger pot you give, the more roots you have, the better quality fruit your fruit will be. It will taste better, you'll have to do less watering and you'll have to do less feeding. So always give as much room as possible to the roots of any plant, because that essentially allows the plant to do well. So I've put a little bit of compost in the bottom. I'm going to turn this upside down, squeeze it very gently. Look at that nice healthy root system on that. Exactly what you would like to see on a healthy plant. I'm going to put it in, see how I'm burying it now. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap off these bottom leaves like that. So if I show you inside, I've taken off all the bottom leaves and then I'm going to fill it up with compost around it. And I'm doing that again because it's exactly the same principle. By filling it with compost around the stem, I'll get more roots. And I'm using really nice, rich, organic, heat-free compost because I want to have delicious tasting tomatoes, and I believe the best way to get good tasting tomatoes is to use really good quality compost. Now, like I said, once you see the flowers on your tomatoes, you have to feed. And any shop-bought compost has food in it for about 4 to 6 weeks, and then after that you have to provide the food. And you can do that either by using slow release food like chicken manure pellets. You can use organic ones because non-organic ones come from factory farms. You don't really want that sort of stuff in your nice tomatoes. And so you could use something like chicken manure pellets, or you could use commercially manufactured feeds like Tomato-Rite. But to be honest, it's a bit like deciding to feed your babies entirely on like burgers for the rest of its life. not very healthy. Whole food is better. So your other option is you can make your own, and you can do that with comfrey and nettle leaves, which you can rot down in a barrel or in a bucket and then dilute it and pour it on. Or you can buy a kind of liquid feed like seaweed feed, which is a natural, organic, very healthy food which will ensure that your tomatoes grow very well. So there we go. I'm not going to I'm just going to tamp down the pot, but I'm not going to squeeze down because I don't want to damage the stem. It's quite a tender thing in that whole space. And I am actually going to mulch on top of this. I find that mulching around the base of the tomatoes is a really good idea because it conserves extra moisture. So I'm going to mulch around with some stuff called strolch. If you didn't want to mulch and you have just a plant like this and you think, oh, that looks a bit sad, you could do something like plant basil around its base. Now tomatoes do something very interesting when they're growing next to something that's a different species from them. So when they're growing with a companion plant, certain genes that help the plant promote disease resistance within its system get turned on only when the plant is growing next to something that isn't a tomato. So traditionally you always put basil around the base of your plant because tomatoes and basils taste fantastic, and also the basil helps to keep whitefly off the tomato. So it's a really nice little trick, and it makes the pot look a lot more attractive. And if you haven't got any basil because you haven't sown any, you could just go to the supermarket and buy one of those cheap, basil plants that you buy for cooking, and then just carefully break it up. I'm pretty sure there's a home serve video on how to do that, and plant around the base of your tomato. And then every other week, remember to give it some nice food, either seaweed fertilizer or comfrey fertilizer feed, and you will have hopefully tomatoes by the end of the year.